What's up, everybody? It's Priyon Joni. So I am starting a new series called Scratching Without the Wheel. It's going to be a multi-video series where I'm going to show you guys multiple tutorials on how to do scratch-like techniques without the use of the jog wheel or the platter. This came up as a request because after my Red Bull 3 Style 10 submission video, a couple of you guys asked how did I do the scratching with the Q button technique. There's actually a lot of ways to do these techniques, but I'm going to start with this video showing you guys just the simple way to set it up and to start it off. Here's the clip from my Red Bull 3 Style 10 video where I'm actually doing one of these techniques. All right, so let me show you guys how to set this up. Setting it up is really simple. So the history on this specific technique, I've actually come across a tutorial on it from someone back in 2006, 2007 when I was on djforums.com. I forgot the name of the person, and since that time, that person has taken the video down. But the initial way of how to do that technique actually stems from this very simple thing that he did. But before we get to the technique, DJs, let me ask you, where do you get your music from? Are you still ripping it off YouTube or SoundCloud? Are you using those YouTube to MP3 download sites? Remember guys, whenever you rip anything from YouTube or any streaming site, you run the risk of having low quality files. And when you play it at a big system, it's really obvious. What you need is a subscription from Direct Music Service. DMS is an online database for working DJs and mix artists. It's the one-stop shop to get edits and remixes of your favorite hits from all the popular genres. Not only does DMS make it easy to find music, but they have this mobile app. So if you're always on the go, on the road, just like me, you can listen, choose your songs, put it on your wish list, and it'll be ready for you on your Dropbox folder when you get to your computer at home. Go to directmusicservice.com today to sign up. So I'm showing this technique to you guys on Serato DJ Pro, and it might be a little different on different software. For example, on Rekordbox DJ, you have to make sure to go in your settings and set the hot cues to gate, meaning when you press the hot cues, it doesn't keep on playing when you let go, unless it's already playing. It's really important to be in a gated mode. I believe right now on CDJs, you can only do gating with the temporary Q button, and it automatically plays when you hit any of the hot cues. It doesn't matter too much which side you choose, but preferably try to choose the side that you actually scratch with. The reason why is so that if you want to do the Q button technique and then switch over to using the jog wheel, you can do that in an instant. But as far as just doing the Q button scratching, you can do it on either side. Now, to decide on which hand's going to do what, it's preferable that you use your dominant hand to be on the Q buttons or the hot Q buttons, and then have your weaker hand to control the tempo pitch slider. I'm left-handed, and when I do scratch techniques, I have my left hand on the fader and my right hand on the jog wheel. So when I do the hot Q scratching technique, I have my left hand on the buttons and I have my right hand on the pitch slider. If you're right-handed, I would recommend doing this instead. Left hand on the fader, right hand on the buttons. So now I'm going to load my scratch attack track onto the right deck. I'll give you guys a link down in the pinned comments to this specific scratch track. So right now I don't have any hot cues loaded. And even without hot cues, you can still do this technique. In fact, I used to use a CDJ 800 and I did this technique with absolutely no hot cues way back in the day. So what you got to do is, number one, you got to turn your key lock off. So that way, when you're moving the tempo pitch slider, it will actually change its pitch. Number two, you are going to also set the tempo range to wide. I have a DDJ SB3, and wide on my tempo range is at plus minus 50%. On a bigger controller or a CDJ, you can do up to 100%. 50%, however, will work for this technique. So even without the hot cues, what we can do right here, right now, is we can set a temporary cue point at the beginning of one of the scratch samples. Let's do it with the first one, which is the ah sample. And now whenever you press the button, the cue button, it plays from the temporary cue button right there. Now, with your other hand, you can totally manipulate the pitch sound as you're pressing the button. Okay? So what you can do is you can do a lot of techniques the same way you would do with a fader. So for example, you can do transformers. Now, whenever I end a phrase in the scratch, you'll notice I always bring it back to about 0. On my controller, there's a click there. So wherever I go, I always go back to 0, or I kind of do like a pitch break, for example. So it's either 0 or slow down. What I don't do is I don't do like a gradual speed up. Like, it doesn't sound natural. You always want to end on a 0 or a slow down. So let's do transformers again. Okay. And then you can take it up a notch and do crabs. Basically, you take your fingers and you snap them, either all 4 or at least 3. All 4. we have 5 digits. So either 3 fingers or 4 fingers, just like on the fader. And then you hit it one more time for a 0 or a pitch down. And you could do it in a rhythm. Okay? And then another technique that a friend of mine actually did, and he's a really good scratcher, and he was an all turntable guy. He did something pretty fun. He did a twiddle the same way you would do on a fader, but he did it on the cue button. So he did it like this. So yeah, that's the fundamental of this technique. Setting a cue point, having the key lock off, and using the pitch tempo slider to variate the pitch of the sample. Now, how do you use it with hot cues? Let's set some hot cue points inside the scratch track. Let's start with the ah sample. Now I want to be kind of inside the sample, so we want to be right here. So it's at 0.4 seconds. Now I'm gonna bring it up. It's the fresh sound. Now I want to be inside it when I set it on hot cue number 2, meaning a little bit of the sample passes before you set the hot cue. So it's at 1.6 seconds. Next, I'm gonna do the ah yeah. We're gonna be a little bit inside, and then we're gonna set it to hot cue number 3. It's at 2.3 seconds. Oh yeah! And then this last ah sample, be a little bit inside on the 4th hot cue at 3.2 seconds. Then one last sample I want to get is this little, whatever you call that noise. So let's get this right here on the 5th hot cue. And that's on 17.0 seconds. So now we have 5 different scratch samples on the hot cues. Okay? So the way I did this on the Red Bull 3 Stall 10 video was that I would essentially select a sample, and then I would quickly get into that sample by pressing the temporary Q button, and I would use the Q button to be the one to do the performance with. So the way I did this was I started with the sample. Okay? When I click hot cue number 5, and then I click the Q button, that first initial click of the Q button, you don't hear anything because what it's doing is it's now setting that point to the temporary Q button. So let's try that again. No sound. Now it's basically armed, and I can start performing with the Q button with that sample. Now when I want to change to a different sample, I set the pitch slider all the way down to 0 so you'll barely hear it, but I'll just gently tap another hot cue button. Let's say hot cue number 1. Then I arm it by hitting the temporary Q button. You didn't hear anything. So now it's armed on hot cue number 1 in the temporary Q button. Okay? So let me show you guys how I jump between each scratch sample. Okay? So now maybe you guys are wondering, why aren't I using the hot cue buttons? Why am I using the temporary Q button? Well, on the DDJ SB3, and I think all the entry-level controllers, there's a little bit of a click in the hot cues. And I think the bigger controllers, I don't want to say all of them because I could be wrong, but I believe on most, if not all, the bigger controllers, it's a little bit more like an MPC where there is no click. It's just when you touch it, it works. Because when I'm using one of those, I don't necessarily need to set it to the temporary Q button. I would do something like this, and let me just show you guys an example. But yeah, a little harder when there's a click to the performance pads. To me, it sounds a little choppy. And to be honest, on the entry-level controllers, it's also hard because they're smaller. Now, a little other something you can do, which I did. On the effects in Serato, I had reverb on my scratching. So on Effects Bank, I loaded this one called Epic Verb Drop. Turned it on, brought it up to about 10 o'clock-ish, maybe 9. So when I'm doing the scratching, it sounds like this. So yeah, you can add a little bit of reverb to it, especially when you're doing it with dance music, just to give it a little bit more depth and room. So when you guys saw me do it in my Red Bull 3 Style 10 video, you saw me pick it up. So a couple things to note if you're ever going to do that with your controller where you pick it up and start performing with it. Make sure that there's enough slack on your USB cable and your RCA. Because as soon as you unplug that, you know what happens. So what I do is I just kind of pick it up, kind of lean it against my chest, and then select a sample. Yep, way easier to do on an entry-level controller. But if you guys want to try that on a DDJ SZ2, I would love to see it. So yeah, guys, let's do this now real quick with a beat. So hope you guys like that tutorial. And there might be people out there that's going to say this is cheating, but it actually takes a lot of practice to do in order to make it sound natural, like real scratching. And I'm not saying it sounds exactly like scratching, that's not my claim, but I've heard other people try this technique too, and sometimes it doesn't sound as aesthetically pleasing because it doesn't, they're not hitting the zero or doing the pitch down at the end, and it just sounds like somebody hitting buttons. Now in future videos, I'm going to show you guys how I did this. And I got a couple other techniques that I haven't done in front of people or on any video. So this is going to be an ongoing series showing you guys some of the things you can do without the use of the jog wheel or the platter. All right, well, if you got any questions, comments, or anything to add, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. Would love to hear your thoughts or learn anything new. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button. And if it's your first time here and you found this video useful, be sure to click that subscribe button, and don't forget to click that little bell icon so you get a notification the next time I upload a video. All right, guys, it was fun. Take care.